In this video, I'm going to be going over the basics of assembling metal models. Now, most companies use plastic or resin, but there are still some large companies and some indie companies that use metal models instead of plastic or resin. What we're going to need are files. These are 3 basic files. Now, our workhorse one is going to be this flat rectangular one. It gets the job done for most work. But there are 2 others. This is a triangular file for getting into corners. And then there's this round one for smoothing certain edges. Each has their use. We have a pin vise for drilling holes. You're going to need one that has a few different size collets to hold different sized bits. And of course, a way to attach them. We're of course going to need some drill bits in order to drill different sized holes. Now, if you're a serious hobbyer, I would recommend getting a rotary tool. Now, this one is a Dremel stylus to be precise. It has an adjustable speed dial on it, but if you get just a cheap rotary tool, it'll work just fine. And of course, we're going to need wire if you're going to be doing any pinning, which many metal models will need. All right. So, let's begin. First off, we're going to need, of course, our model and the absolute basics nippers. If you're into hobbying or modeling, you already have a pair of these. So the model I'm going to be assembling today is Octo. It's from the Atlantican faction of Traders Galaxy's game Bot War. So we have a base here, but we're going to put it back in the bag for safekeeping so that we don't lose it. And then go ahead and take stock of all the parts that you have. Now, metal models are typically cast individually by hand. So what you need to do is go through each and every single piece, make sure that they're all there. It helps if you just arrange all of the parts around the main body of the model, just so that you can easily see what parts are there. Looks like we're all good. When metal models are made, they have these things on them called flash, and basically it's just extra bits of metal that are just there as part of the casting process. These bits were loose, but your model is going to have flash all over it. You can see here. And usually it can just be taken off just with your fingers. And trust me, pretty much every single part is going to have flash on it. Now, it can be tedious to go around picking off every single bit, so we're going to use nippers to take them off. Makes the job quick and easy. You should note that metal models typically have very small pieces on them, and you don't want to mistake them for flash and accidentally cut them off. Again, the gun barrels, you don't want to accidentally cut those off, so inspect each piece before you cut anything off. So let's begin. Just go around each and every single piece and cut off all the bits of flash. Now, once you're done, you should have a model that may be ready for assembly. However, if you want to go the extra step, go ahead and set your nippers aside and grab your files. Clear our workspace. And I'm going to go ahead and use the rectangular file for this. Now, you should note that if you're going to be doing the bare minimum of filing, the bottom of the character's feet is a must. You have to have the character sitting on the base properly. So just go around the model. Any place that feels sharp and rough that should feel smooth, go ahead and file that down. You want your character to have a proper seating on its base, so make sure that the bottom of the feet are smooth. If it's supposed to be sitting on a base, make sure it's completely flat. You don't have to be as nitpicky as me, but I'm rather particular when it comes to models. Now, some models have flash lines or mold lines. We're fortunate that this one doesn't have any. Alright, so we should be done with our filing, but you may occasionally find parts that you forgot to file down, so set them aside within easy arm's reach. Alright, let's go ahead and grab the torso. Now with metal models, the holes where you would put the arms and legs and head sometimes get filled in with metal, as you can see here. And over here on the other armhole, it has been filled in with metal. So we take the arm, and you'll find that it is quite impossible to fit into that hole. Same thing with the other arm, it's just not going to fit. On this model, the head can mostly fit into the hole, but just to get a proper fit, we're going to go ahead and drill that out as well. The legs, looks like we're going to have some minor issues here too. This leg is not sitting properly, and while this one is almost perfect, you can see that there's just a slight gap here that's preventing a perfect fit. So I'm going to go ahead and grind that out. In order to do that, we're going to need to have our pinning tool. Now, if you have a rotary tool, I recommend you use it, but if you don't, a pin vise will work just as well. So go ahead and find out which drill bit is the right size for the hole you need to drill. Looks like this one is the right size. So then, with your Dremel or your pinning tool, go ahead and find which collet will be the proper size to fit the bit and load it up. Just do one final test fit. Yep, that's the one we need. Now go ahead and tighten this as much as you can. You don't want your tool to be spinning, but your drill bit not to be. Line it up with the hole and carefully begin drilling. Once you're done, go ahead and test fit the pieces in. Make sure that the hole is deep enough. Now, whenever you're removing material, it's always a good idea to go slow and test fit often, because while it's easy to take material off, it's pretty much impossible to put it back on. And now we have to deal with the legs. Now, while you could use a pinning tool it's just a lot easier to use a rotary device or a Dremel, so I'm going to go ahead and use these grinding bits that I have and go ahead and grind out the part for the leg. Adjust the speed appropriately and start grinding. Now again, like I said, go slow, test fit often. You don't want to take off too much. It's a much better fit. This is an optional step, but it's something that I always insist upon doing. It's drilling holes in the bottom of the feet for pins to attach it to the base. I'm going to go ahead and use the Dremel for this job. It just makes it easier. Metal models, since they're much heavier, have a tendency to not sit properly on the base, especially if you, heaven forbid, drop your mini, and so pinning will definitely help. We're lucky that this model didn't require the arms and legs to be pinned, but I always pin metal models to the base. Drill into a secure part of the foot, and then we're done. Now we have a mess here that we need to clean up. Boom, we're all done. Clean workspace. Once you have your model done, it's time to glue. Now you don't want to use plastic glue for this, you want to use super glue, and I here have two kinds. I have an ultra gel control type and a liquid control type. Each has their uses. The gel is basically for big chunky parts and to securely hold lots of things, filling gaps, while the thin is used for filling in small gaps. You're also going to want to have something to hold your pieces while they cure. I happen to have a small desk vise. So we'll set that aside and get to work. We're going to start out with the gel type. You don't want to use too much glue, but you also don't want to use too little. I always err on the side of security and use just a little bit too much so that I know I'm going to get a strong hold. Now you could use Accelerator to speed up the drawing process, but Accelerator, while it does make the glue cure much faster, it also tends to make the glue a bit more brittle, so you don't get as strong a hold, which is why I don't use it, especially for metal models. So you're basically just going to be stuck sitting there holding a piece until it has cured enough that you can let it go and start moving it around, which should only take about 30 seconds. Now there's a few gaps that don't have too much glue or have a bit too much, so I'm just going to get a little scrap something. You can use a toothpick, whatever you happen to have at hand. I'm just going to take off the excess and then kind of squeeze it into a section that could use just a bit more. Again, you don't have to be as nitpicky as I am. This is just how I assemble my models. And once you're done with that, go ahead and put your model into whatever holding device you're going to use, so you can have the glue really cure. And then move on to working on other pieces, like these two arm sections. Now this model in the game has a magnetic disruption gun, which is the most powerful ranged weapon that the game has. So you can see here that this model has a small gap right in here. And we're going to go ahead and use our liquid glue to fill in that tiny little seam and get a really secure hold. But while we let that gel glue dry, we can go ahead and move on to gluing on the other leg. And then we get back to our liquid glue. Just a little bit, and a capillary action should draw the glue into that seam. So then you go ahead, cap your glue up, set the piece aside to dry. And then you just wait. Once that's all done, you go ahead and attach the arms to the body. Then glue and position the head how you want it to be in its final position. And that's it. You're done. Pinning holes and everything. You can then go ahead and attach the model to the base, either just like this, or by pinning it. Now, again, as I said, this model is Octo. He's from the Atlantican faction. You can pick him up from tradersgalaxy.com.au. And this is for the game Bot War. Well, I hope you found this video informative. Metal models were a norm in games. Once things moved to resin and plastic, this seemed to be a lost art, but with just a bit of practice and hobby know-how, you can do it too.